The morning of my wedding felt like something out of a dream, the kind of day you imagine for years and hope it turns out just right. The sun was just starting to rise, casting a soft, golden glow over everything. I woke up feeling both nervous and excited, my stomach fluttering with a mix of anticipation and happiness. Today was supposed to be the start of a new chapter in my life. The moment I finally said, "I do," to the woman I loved with all my heart. I got out of bed and looked in the mirror, trying to shake off the nerves. I kept reminding myself that this was normal, that every groom probably felt a little jittery before the big moment. My friends had told me that the nerves would melt away as soon as I saw her walking down the aisle, and I believed them. She was my safe place, the person who made everything feel better. That thought alone brought a smile to my face. The hours leading up to the ceremony were packed with the usual pre-wedding buzz. My best man was by my side, cracking jokes to keep the mood light. He had always been that guy, the one who could make me laugh even when I was stressed out. We'd been through so much together over the years, and it felt right to have him standing next to me on the most important day of my life. Another close friend was there too, helping out with last-minute details and making sure everything was going smoothly. Everything about the day seemed perfect. The venue was stunning, decorated just the way we had envisioned. The flowers, the seating arrangements, the music, it all came together beautifully. I had spent months planning every detail with my fiancé, and seeing it all come to life felt like a dream. As the morning progressed, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this point. We had been through so much as a couple, ups and downs, moments that tested us and moments that brought us closer. I had no doubt in my mind that she was the one. She had this way of lighting up a room with her presence, making everyone feel at ease. I couldn't wait to see her in her wedding dress, to hold her hand and promise to love her forever. While my friends and I were getting ready, we shared stories and memories from the past. It felt good to reminisce, to remind ourselves of how far we had all come. There was a sense of camaraderie in the room, a bond that felt unbreakable. My best man gave a little speech about how proud he was of me, how he had always known I would find someone special. His words were heartfelt, and they meant a lot to me. I thought about my fiancée, wondering how she was feeling. I knew she had been nervous about the wedding, too, but in a different way. She wanted everything to be perfect, and she had been stressing over every little detail for weeks. I had tried to reassure her, telling her that none of that mattered as long as we ended the day married. At the end of the day, it wasn't about the flowers or the food or the decorations. It was about us, about the commitment we were making to each other. As the morning wore on, I started to feel more relaxed. The nerves were still there, but they were overshadowed by excitement. I couldn't wait to see her, to hold her hand and start our forever. My friends kept me busy, making sure I didn't have too much time to overthink things. They were great at keeping the mood light, cracking jokes and making sure I was having fun. At one point, I stepped outside to get some fresh air. The day was beautiful, with clear skies and a gentle breeze. I took a deep breath, letting the moment sink in. This was it, the day I had been waiting for. I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for everything in my life, for the people who had supported me, and for the woman I was about to marry. The wedding was only a few hours away, and everything was falling into place. My suit was ready, the rings were safe in my best man's pocket, and the vows I had written were tucked away in a notebook. I had spent weeks perfecting those vows, making sure they captured everything I felt for her. I couldn't wait to see her reaction when I read them. As the time drew closer, the excitement in the air was palpable. Everyone around me was smiling, laughing, and looking forward to the ceremony. It felt like the kind of day where nothing could go wrong, where everything was exactly as it should be. I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in the life I was building, in the love I had found. Looking back now, it's almost hard to believe how perfect everything seemed in those moments. I was completely oblivious to what was coming, to the betrayal that would soon turn my world upside down. At that moment, all I could see was the future I had envisioned, the life I thought we were going to build together. If I had known what was waiting for me just a few steps away, maybe I would have done something differently. Maybe I would have stayed in that moment a little longer, savoring the happiness and hope that filled the air. But I didn't know. All I knew was that I was about to marry the woman I loved, surrounded by the people who mattered most to me. It felt like the start of something beautiful, something unbreakable. That morning was the calm before the storm, a fleeting moment of bliss before everything came crashing down. And even now, after everything that happened, I still remember how it felt to believe in that perfect beginning. It's a feeling I'll never forget, no matter how much pain followed. The morning had been a whirlwind of excitement and nervous energy, with every detail of the wedding coming together as planned. But as the ceremony drew closer, I realized I'd forgotten something important: my vows. They were in a notebook I'd left in my fiancé's suite, tucked away in a corner where I'd been working on them the night before. I hadn't even thought to grab them during the rush of the morning. At first, I brushed off the idea of going back for them. It seemed like a minor detail that could wait until later. But as I sat there thinking about it, the importance of those vows started to weigh on me. I'd poured my heart into writing them, carefully choosing every word to capture how I felt about her and our future together. Leaving them behind didn't feel right. The thought of breaking the tradition about not seeing the bride before the ceremony crossed my mind, but I quickly dismissed it. It wasn't like I planned to see her. I just needed to slip in quietly, grab the notebook, and leave. No one would even know I was there. I told myself it would only take a minute. With that thought in mind, I left the room where my friends were still joking and chatting, completely unaware of my plans. I didn't bother telling them where I was going. It seemed unnecessary for such a quick errand. My focus was on getting the vows and getting back without disrupting the flow of the day. The walk to her suite felt oddly quiet. The excitement and chatter that had filled the air earlier seemed to fade as I got closer. It wasn't nerves exactly, but something about the moment felt different. Maybe it was the anticipation of seeing her space, a place she'd been getting ready for one of the biggest moments of our lives. Or maybe it was just the weight of the day pressing down on me. When I reached the door, I paused for a moment. I didn't want to make a scene or disturb anything, so I knocked lightly. There was no response. I waited a few seconds, then knocked again. Still nothing. Figuring she was probably with the bridesmaids in another part of the suite or out taking photos, I decided to let myself in. The door creaked open slowly, and I stepped inside, trying to be as quiet as possible. The room smelled faintly of perfume and flowers, a mix that felt distinctly like her. The sight of her dress hanging on the wardrobe caught my eye, and for a brief moment, I smiled. It was surreal to think that in just a few hours, she'd be walking down the aisle wearing it. I scanned the room, looking for the notebook. It wasn't on the desk where I thought I'd left it, so I started glancing around, trying not to disturb anything. I didn't want to leave a trace that I'd been there. My heart was pounding slightly, partly from the excitement of the day and partly because I didn't want anyone to catch me. That's when I heard it, a sound coming from the other side of the suite. At first I thought it was laughter, maybe her and her friends joking around while getting ready. But as I listened closer, I realized it wasn't laughter at all. It was something else entirely. Voices, muffled and low, mixed with noises I couldn't quite place. Curiosity got the better of me. I wasn't trying to intrude, but something about the sounds drew me in. I stepped closer to the partially open door leading to the adjoining room, my footsteps barely making a sound on the carpet. The closer I got, the clearer the noises became, and with them came a sinking feeling in my chest. I stopped at the doorway and peered inside, and that's when I saw it. The scene before me didn't make sense at first. My fiancée was there, but she wasn't alone. She was with two men, my best man and another close friend, entangled in a way that left no room for doubt about what was happening. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment I couldn't move. It was like my brain was struggling to process what my eyes were seeing. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a complete and utter violation of everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me. I felt a rush of emotions all at once: shock, anger, heartbreak, disbelief. My mind raced with questions I couldn't even begin to answer. How long had this been going on? How could they do this to me on this day of all days? The betrayal wasn't just coming from her, it was from two people I trusted implicitly, people I considered family. Before I could make a sound, she turned and saw me standing there. For a split second, her expression shifted from shock to anger, as though I was the one in the wrong for being there. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice sharp and accusing. "You're not supposed to see the bride before the ceremony." Her words hit me like a slap in the face, not because of what she said, but because of the audacity behind them. She wasn't apologetic. She wasn't embarrassed or ashamed. Instead, she was acting like I was the one ruining the day, as though I'd walked in on something perfectly normal. I stood there frozen as the weight of what I had just witnessed settled over me. My stomach churned and my chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe. The world around me seemed to blur, the sounds of her yelling and their frantic attempts to explain fading into the background. All I could think about was how this one moment had destroyed everything I thought I knew about the people I loved. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. There was nothing to say that would make sense of what I'd just seen. I turned on my heel and walked out of the room, each step feeling heavier than the last. The shock was starting to give way to anger, but I pushed it down, determined to get as far away from that room as possible. As I left the suite, the laughter and chatter from other guests reached my ears, a cruel reminder of the day I thought I was going to have, the day I thought was going to be perfect. It was anything but. Shock hit me like a tidal wave as I stepped away from the doorway, my mind struggling to catch up with the scene I had just walked into. It was as though the world around me had been ripped apart, leaving nothing but chaos and disbelief in its place. The image of my fiancé with my best man and another close friend burned itself into my memory, a cruel and unshakable reminder of the betrayal unfolding right before my eyes. In that moment, I felt frozen, unable to move or speak, my body rooted to the spot as my brain raced through every possible explanation. Maybe I had misinterpreted what I saw. Maybe this wasn't what it seemed. But deep down, I knew the truth. There was no mistaking what I had just witnessed. My fiancée, the woman I had planned to marry in a few hours, was betraying me in the most unforgivable way. With anger started to bubble beneath the surface of my shock, a fiery, uncontrollable rage that made my hands clench into fists at my sides. My best man. He was supposed to be like a brother to me, someone I trusted implicitly, someone I had chosen to stand by my side on what should have been the happiest day of my life. And then there was the other friend, someone I had shared countless memories with, someone I never would have suspected of doing something like this. Together, they had shattered every ounce of trust I had in them. But the worst part was her, my fiancée, the woman I had loved with every fiber of my being. I had poured my heart and soul into our relationship, into building a future together, into believing that we were meant to be. And now, all of that felt like a cruel joke, a lie she had been telling me while carrying on behind my back. My thoughts spiraled, bouncing between heartbreak and fury. How long had this been going on? Was this the first time, or had they been laughing behind my back for weeks, months, even years? Every moment we had shared, every tender word, every promise of forever, it all felt tainted, like it had been built on a foundation of deceit. As I stood there, still trying to process everything, she turned and saw me. Her eyes widened for a split second, a flicker of shock crossing her face before it was replaced with something else entirely. Anger. She didn't look guilty or apologetic. She didn't seem panicked or regretful. Instead, she had the audacity to look annoyed, as though I had interrupted something trivial. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice sharp and accusatory. "You're not supposed to see the bride before the ceremony." Her words were like a slap in the face, and for a moment I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was yelling at me, as though I were the one in the wrong, as though my presence in that room was the issue, not what she had been doing. It was surreal, almost laughable in a twisted, bitter way. The level of audacity it took to say something like that in this situation left me speechless. The anger that had been simmering inside me erupted, surging through my veins like fire. My chest heaved as I stared at her, the woman I had once thought I would spend my life with, and I felt nothing but disgust. She stood there, still trying to justify her actions, as though she believed she could talk her way out of this. I glanced at the two men, my so-called friends, who were fumbling over their words, their faces flushed with embarrassment and guilt. They looked like children caught doing something they knew was wrong, but their discomfort did nothing to lessen my rage. They didn't deserve my forgiveness. Not now, not ever. My fiancé's voice rose again, trying to regain control of the situation, but I wasn't listening. Her words were a blur, meaningless sounds that couldn't penetrate the storm in my mind. My focus was on the betrayal, the lies, the sheer disrespect they had shown me. Every ounce of love I had for her was drowned out by the overwhelming sense of betrayal. I couldn't understand how she could do this, especially on the day of our wedding. This was supposed to be a celebration of our love, a moment we had worked so hard to reach, and she had destroyed it in an instant. I didn't respond to her. There was nothing I could say that would capture the depth of my anger and heartbreak. Instead, I let my actions speak for me. My hands shook as I reached up and yanked the engagement ring off her finger. It felt like a symbol of everything we had been building together. And in that moment, it meant I held the ring in my hand for a brief second before letting it fall to the ground. It landed with a soft clink, a sound that seemed insignificant compared to the weight of the moment. I watched as her expression shifted, a flicker of realization crossing her face, but it was too late. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the room. The sound of her yelling followed me, her voice frantic and desperate now, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Every step I took felt heavier than the last, but I kept going, driven by a need to escape the suffocating weight of what I had just experienced. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions as I left the suite behind. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and broken, but above all, I felt angry. Angry at her, at them, at myself for not seeing the signs sooner. The world around me blurred as I made my way back to my own space, the chatter of wedding preparations fading into the background. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't go through with the wedding. I couldn't stand in front of my friends and family, pretending that everything was fine when the truth was anything but. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a complete destruction of the life I thought I was building. As I sat alone, trying to process everything, one thought kept repeating in my mind. This wasn't love. This wasn't the future I wanted. And no matter how much it hurt, I knew I had to walk. Leaving the suite, I felt like a ghost drifting through the halls, disconnected from everything around me. My mind was an endless storm of emotions. Rage, heartbreak, humiliation, and an almost numbing disbelief that all of this was real. The lively atmosphere of the hotel, bustling with preparations for what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, only made it worse. Every flower arrangement, every champagne glass, every smiling face I passed felt like a cruel mockery of the shattered reality I was carrying inside me. I avoided eye contact with anyone, too afraid that they might see the turmoil on my face. My chest felt tight, and my heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the noise of people chatting and laughing around me. Every step I took felt like dragging myself through quicksand, but I kept moving, desperate to get away from everything and everyone. When I reached my room, I shut the door behind me with more force than I intended. The sound echoed in the silence, a sharp reminder that I was finally alone. I leaned against the door, my breath coming in short, uneven gasps as the weight of what had just happened started to settle in. It wasn't just the betrayal itself, it was the timing, the audacity, the complete lack of regard for everything we were supposed to be building together. I sank into a chair, my hands trembling as they gripped the armrests. My mind replayed the scene over and over, as if trying to make sense of it, but there was no sense to be made. The woman I had planned to marry, the one I thought I knew better than anyone, had been capable of something so cruel, so brazen, that it left me questioning everything. How had I missed the signs? Were there signs? I thought about every moment we had shared leading up to this day. The late-night talks about our future, the plans we'd made, the love I thought we had. It all felt like a cruel joke now, a lie she had been telling me while carrying on this betrayal behind my back. And my best man, The person I trusted to stand by my side, to support me through one of the biggest days of my life, his actions felt like an even deeper cut. A betrayal layered on top of betrayal. The anger in me began to boil over, my fists clenching as I thought about their smug faces, their audacity to do this just hours before the wedding. My fiancé's words rang in my ears. "You're not supposed to see the bride before the ceremony." The sheer absurdity of her reaction, the gall to act as though I was in the wrong, sent a fresh wave of fury coursing through me. My eyes landed on the small suitcase I had packed for the honeymoon, sitting neatly in the corner of the room. The sight of it made my stomach churn. It was supposed to be a symbol of the life we were about to start together, the adventures we were going to share. Now it felt like a mocking reminder of everything I had just lost. I stood up abruptly, pacing the room in an attempt to burn off the restless energy surging through me. My thoughts were scattered, jumping from anger to heartbreak to disbelief and back again. Part of me wanted to confront her, to march back into that suite and unleash every ounce of rage I was feeling. But another part of me, the part that was louder in that moment, knew it wasn't worth it. She wasn't worth it. Instead, I focused on what I needed to do next. The wedding wasn't happening, that much was clear. There was no way I could stand at the altar, look her in the eyes, and promise to love and cherish her when she had shattered every ounce of trust between us. But how could I disappear without causing a scene? How could I escape this nightmare without facing the inevitable questions and judgments from everyone involved? I grabbed my phone and stared at it, debating whether to call someone, my parents, a close friend, anyone who might understand. But the thought of explaining what had happened, of putting the betrayal into words, felt unbearable. I didn't want sympathy or pity. I didn't want to see the shock and disappointment on their faces. Instead, I started packing. Every movement was deliberate, fueled by a mix of anger and determination. I shoved clothes into my suitcase, not caring if they got wrinkled or if I was forgetting something. The goal was simple: to leave. To put as much distance as possible between myself and the wreckage of what was supposed to be my wedding day. As I zipped up the suitcase, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. The person staring back at me looked like a stranger, disheveled, hollow-eyed, and carrying the weight of a betrayal too heavy to bear. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of sadness for the man I had been just a few hours ago, the man who had believed in love and trust and forever. That man was gone now, replaced by someone who had learned the hard way that not everyone is who they claim to be. With my suitcase in hand, I took one last look around the room. It felt strange leaving like this, knowing that everyone downstairs was expecting me to walk down the aisle, to exchange vows, to celebrate a love that no longer existed. But I couldn't stay. Staying meant facing them, facing her, and pretending that everything was fine when it was anything but. I left the room quietly, avoiding anyone who might recognize me. The halls felt emptier now, the buzz of wedding preparations fading into the background as I made my way to the exit. Each step felt like shedding a piece of the weight I had been carrying, like reclaiming a part of myself that had been lost in the chaos of the day. When I stepped outside, the fresh air hit me like a lifeline, a reminder that there was still a world beyond the pain I was feeling. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do next, but one thing was certain. I was done. Done with the wedding, done with the lies, and done with the people who had betrayed me. As I walked away, I didn't look back. There was no reason to. Everything I had left behind was broken, and I had no intention of picking up the pieces. All that mattered now was moving forward, one step at a time. Walking away from that hotel, from the chaos, the betrayal, and the wreckage of what should have been my wedding day, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was the undeniable anger still burning within me, a fire that refused to be extinguished. But alongside it, there was an overwhelming numbness, a hollow feeling in my chest where all the love, trust, and hope I had carried for years used to live. But the streets around me were busy, filled with people going about their lives, unaware of the storm that had just upended mine. I envied them, in a way. They weren't grappling with the realization that everything they believed in had been a lie. For a brief moment, I wondered how many of them had faced their own betrayals, how many carried similar scars beneath their smiles. It didn't make my pain any easier to bear, but it reminded me that I wasn't alone. I walked aimlessly, letting my feet carry me wherever they wanted. The weight of my suitcase dragged behind me, its wheels rattling against the pavement. It felt like the only thing tethering me to reality, a constant reminder that this wasn't some nightmare I could wake up from. This was real. My wedding was over before it had even begun, and the life I thought I was building was gone. Memories of her flashed in my mind, uninvited and cruel. I remembered the way she had smiled when we first got engaged, the excitement in her voice as we talked about our future. I thought about all the times she had assured me that I was the love of her life, that she couldn't wait to spend forever with me. How could someone say those things while carrying on such a betrayal? How could she look me in the eyes, knowing what she was doing behind my back? The anger bubbled up again, sharp and consuming. It wasn't just about her, though. It was about them, too, my best man and the other friend who had been part of this disgusting charade. These were people I had trusted, people I had invited into my life with open arms. They had been there for me during my best and worst moments, and yet they had chosen to spit on that trust in the worst way possible. I stopped at a park bench, dropping my suitcase beside me as I sat down. The weight of everything hit me all at once, a tidal wave of emotions that threatened to pull me under. My hands trembled as I rested them on my knees, my breath coming in shallow gasps. For the first time since I had walked into that room, I allowed myself to feel the full impact of what had happened. Tears stung at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away. I didn't want to cry, didn't want to give them the satisfaction of breaking me completely. But the pain was undeniable, a deep ache that seemed to seep into every corner of my being. It wasn't just the betrayal itself, it was the loss of the future I had envisioned, the dreams I had nurtured, the life I had been so excited to start. As I sat there, I began to think about what came next. There was no going back, no repairing the damage that had been done. Even if she begged for forgiveness, even if they groveled at my feet, I knew there was no way I could ever look at them the same way again. Trust, once shattered, could never be fully rebuilt, and even if it could, I didn't want to. They didn't deserve it. For the first time in what felt like hours, a sense of clarity began to settle over me. This wasn't the end of my life, it was the end of a chapter. A painful, gut-wrenching chapter, but a chapter nonetheless. The thought gave me a small measure of comfort, a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could move on from this. I thought about the people who truly cared about me, the ones who would be shocked and outraged when they found out what had happened. My family, my real friends, they would support me through this. They wouldn't betray me or lie to me. They would help me pick up the pieces and start over. The idea of starting over was daunting, though. It felt like standing at the edge of a vast, empty void, unsure of where to step next. But as I sat there, staring at the ground and listening to the distant hum of the city around me, I realized that starting over also meant freedom. I wasn't tied to her anymore. Wasn't bound to a future with someone who didn't value or respect me. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number of a close friend who wasn't involved in the wedding. Someone I trusted, someone I knew would have my back. I hesitated for a moment before pressing the call button, unsure of how to explain everything. But when they picked up and greeted me with warmth and familiarity, I felt a small weight lift off my shoulders. Talking to them, even briefly, reminded me that I wasn't alone in this. They were shocked, of course, furious on my behalf, but they didn't push me to explain more than I was ready to. They simply listened, offering their support and assuring me that I had made the right decision by walking away. As the call ended, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I didn't have all the answers yet, didn't know exactly where I was headed or what the future held, but I knew I had made the right choice by leaving. Staying would have only prolonged the pain, trapping me in a web of lies and betrayal. I stood up, grabbing my suitcase and taking a deep breath. The air felt cooler now, sharper, as though it was cutting through the fog in my mind. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew I couldn't stay here. This place, this day, this betrayal. It was all part of a past I was ready to leave behind. With each step I took away from the park, I felt a little lighter. The pain was still there, the anger still simmering beneath the surface, but there was also a flicker of hope. Hope that I could rebuild, that I could find happiness again, that I could learn to trust again someday. And as I walked away, I promised myself one thing: I wouldn't let this betrayal define me. I would rise above it, stronger and wiser, ready to face whatever came next.